Okay, I'm gonna go through feedback from some markers on a final year exam question paper of grade 12. So it's grade 12 exam paper feedback that we're gonna look at. Remember, the exam consists of 4 questions. Question 1 is usually your problem solving grade 10 skills and coding. Question 2 consists of your SQL and your added tables, which is your database question. Question 3 is your OOP, your object oriented programming, and then question 4 is usually the more difficult one. It's your arrays, where you need to load in your text file. Okay, so we're going to start with question 1 of the exam question paper. Just go through some of the notes and some of the commonly made errors. Okay, so the important stuff I want to go through, I highlighted in red. Okay, so the first one, candidates lack the knowledge of constants, made in place CL red and CL lime in quotation marks. So let's go look at a memo of a question paper. Question 1. Okay, so the example over here, panel 1 dot color is equals to CL lime. CL lime is a constant, so you don't need to put that CL lime in double quotation marks. Same with CL red, it's a constant, so you don't need to put it in single quotation or double quotation marks. The font size is a integer field, so you don't need single quotations there, but the caption is a string, so the caption is not a constant, it's a variable, so it needs to be in single quotation marks. So the notes commonly made error over here is that the learners put CL red and CL lime in quotation marks, and they should not. Okay, mathematical functions was used incorrectly by some candidates to format their output. Okay, round with 2 parameters, round 2 with a second parameter as 1 and not -1. I just want to drop down here a bit. Mathematical functions must be revised before each examination. Okay, so I do have a video on some of the mathematical functions. If you're not sure, you can have a look at those, or that one video. I'm not sure how many I have there, but I do know that I do have some videos on these mathematical functions, and you need to know your mathematical functions for question 1 in the question paper, because they always ask some mathematical questions in this question. Countless candidates use random and random range wrong, even that there was a possible range of ±1. Okay, if we say random 50 is going to pick a random number between 0 and 49. Okay, so they use this instead of random 46 plus 5. So this will pick a random number between 0 and 45. So that means if the lowest one is 0 and we add another 5, the lowest number will be 5. The highest number that random 46 can pick is 45. Now 45 plus another 5 is 50. So it will pick a random number between 0 and 50. Okay, so if you want to use random range, remember you must add the math under the users on top. Okay, with this one, they used 4, 15. That means it will pick a random number between 4 and 49. It will not include a 50. So they should have used random range 5 and 51. So it will include, with random range, it will include the 5, but it will not include 51. It will only pick a random number between 5 and 50. So before you go and write your exam, make sure that you know exactly how random and random range works. I would recommend random range because it's easier to pick numbers when you don't want it to start at 0. So then you don't need to do any mathematical calculations in your random function. Many candidates did not initialize the step counter to 0. Candidates forgot to include a begin and end for every structure that has more than 2 lines. Okay, so when you are going to use a variable, remember that you must initialize that variable to 0. Like iTotal is equals to 0 or iCount is equals to 0. Let's have a look at the question paper here. Here is iNumber of steps is set to 0 because you're going to use that iNumber of steps somewhere, and that value should be initialized or set to 0. When we look at the next one, the begin and the end, if the structure has more than 2 lines of code, you must use a begin and end. Let's look at this while statement. Okay, while if there's more than 1 line of code inside this while statement, then you must use the begin and end. Otherwise it will only execute the first line. Okay, so it will only repeat the first line a certain amount of times. Okay, so still a lot of users or still a lot of learners forget that they must use begin and end when you want to when the structure has more than 2 lines of code. Okay, there were a few instances that candidates did not use an ordinal data type when using a case structure. Okay, so let's have a look here. When you use a case statement or structure, we must use a ordinal data type. Okay, ordinal data types is like char, character, boolean, or integer. Okay, you cannot use a string or a real with a case statement or case structure. So if you're going to use a string or a real, you must make if statements. Okay, you must have if statements. So if you're going to use a case statement, make sure that you use ordinal data types. Okay, ordinal data types, character, boolean, and integer. Div and mod. Let's say you say 10 div 3, it will be actually 3 and not 3.333 because it will throw away the remainder. 10 mod 3 is equals to 1 because 3 can go into 10 3 times, and what is left, it's the 1. Okay, so with div it will divide but it will throw away the remainder, and with mod it will actually, the answer will be the remainder. Okay, you usually do this in grade 10 and then you might forget about it in grade 12, so it's always good to go back and just make sure about especially the mod and the div. When you work with integers, we use div, but it will throw away the remainders. And when we work with mod, it will actually save the remainder as the answer. Okay, next one, break, exit, and abort. Okay, break is used to stop a loop. Exit, abort to end a procedure. So let's say you have a for statement or while or repeat and you want to end that loop, we use a break. But if you want to end a procedure that you are currently in, we can use abort or exit. Example of the exit is when we use a text file. We test if the file exists. If the file doesn't exist, we usually show a message notifying the user that the file was not found, and then we exit. We stop the rest of the coding on that procedure from executing. Okay, so exit or abort will end the procedure, and a break will stop a current loop. Let's go to question 2, where question 2 is usually your SQL and your added tables. It will consist, the first one is usually your SQL, and the second part will be your added tables. SQL will count plus minus 20 marks, and your added tables will also count plus minus 20 marks. Okay, so let's have a look at the SQL first. The most common problem, I think, is the order by. Okay, the use of sort by instead of order by. So when you are writing an exam, you want to sort something and then you say sort by instead of actually typing order by. Another mistake, learners wrote order by as one word instead of 2 words. Okay, so maybe you're so hooked up in reading the question that you forget that it's actually order by and not sort by. The and between the two conditions are simply left out. For example, where permanent is equals to true and children is bigger than 3. Okay, so make sure that you use the and or. You can't just say where permanent equals to true and then start with your next one. Okay, you must use and or if there's more than one condition. Okay, putting a table name after the selected fields. Okay, so select the field name dot then the table name. Okay, the wrong use of aliases. It must be a space between the table name in the from statement and the where statement. Okay, where statement, the alias must be front of the field name. Okay, so it's table name dot and then your alias, which is wrong. Okay, which is wrong. It should be, the correct example is from table space and then the P, not a dot. Okay, so if you want to rename that table temporarily, it's the table name space and then the new name. And then if you want to use that new alias or name that you gave for that table, it's that alias dot and then the field name. Okay, the alias dot and then the field name. Okay, wrong order of the SQL statements. For example, the user or the learner will say delete, then the where, and then the from. It should actually be delete, then from, and then your where. Okay. The use of a filter to display only records that met the condition. Remember, you are not allowed to use built-in functions. It does state that in the instructions on your question paper. So you're not allowed to use filter in the exam. You can use it in your PAT, but you are not allowed to use it in the exam. Okay, another one, instead of using table payments, then the field name, the learner tried to use the connection and then the field name. Okay, so you should not use the connection, should use the table name and then the field name. The use of SQL code instead of ADO code. Remember, when they ask you to do ADO tables or work with the ADO tables, you are not allowed to use SQL, and vice versa. You're not allowed to use ADO tables when they ask you to do SQL. Like I said, the first part of the question will be the SQL, then the second part will be your ADO tables. Okay, when SQL is taught, remember to stress the importance of the order of the statements. Order by cannot be before a from, or order by is 2 words and sort by is wrong. Okay, in SQL you can use year or month and create a temporary field as month number. In Delphi Coding you use year of, month of, and it does not work in SQL. Okay, so you can't use the year of or the month of, you must use year or month. That's a common mistake. Like I said, teach the difference between SQL and Ado very thoroughly. Okay, Ado is only Delphi based. SQL can be used anywhere. Okay, so if they ask you to use SQL, you must use SQL. If they ask you to do Ado tables, you must use Ado tables. Okay, most of the times you have to loop through the table according to the exam guidelines, and then are not allowed to use a filter or a locate. You have to use an if statement inside the loop. Okay, so this one is for me very important, because when we work with Ado tables, most of the time we are just going to run through your table. Okay, there's a difference between looping through your table and looping through your text file. Okay, text file will look like this, while not EOF, end of file, text file do. When we are running through a Ado table, it will be while not table dot EOF, end of file. Okay, so it's not the same for a text file and an Ado table. Okay, so that's basically it for question 2. I would say the most important thing is to make sure that you do your SQL when they ask you to do SQL, and to do Ado tables when they ask you to do Ado tables. Like I said, Ado tables, usually you're just going to loop through the Ado table. It's going to be Ado table 1.first, then maybe while Ado table not in the file, and then the next Ado table dot next, and sometimes you can have an if statement as well inside that loop, and you are not allowed to use filter or locate in the exam. You are allowed to use it in your PAT, but not in the exam, because it's a built-in function in Delphi. Okay, tips for question 3. It's the OOP question, object oriented programming. It's I think mostly the most intimidating question for the learners, especially when I start working with OOP, but in the end I feel it's not such a difficult question, because there's not a lot of thinking that goes into question 3. Okay, let's start. Candidates created a procedure instead of a function. Okay, so you must read the question carefully, because there's a difference between a procedure and a function. Function will have a result where you send something back, where usually the procedure doesn't send values back. You don't have a result in your procedure, so you must make sure that you know what's the difference between a function and a procedure, and that you can actually see in the question what the question wants from you. Okay, candidates assigned values to the attributes instead of the result or the function. For example, if you have a function, you will have to send something back, so you can't just assign it to attribute, you will have to send that value back. Okay, there were a few candidates that spelled result wrong. It's not results, but it's actually just result. Remember, you can also use the function name if you want to send that value back. Common mistakes by candidates. Object name, yes, this happens quite a lot. When you create your object and you say object name dot, it will actually suggest for you just to say create in the Delphi program. What you're actually supposed to do is add the object name equals to then the class name dot create. So this is a correct way to do it. Make sure that you don't use the shorter one dot create and just call the normal procedure create. Okay, make sure that you do that step correctly when you create your new object. Providing arguments without values or wrong data types, only calling the toString without the object name. Okay. Some candidates extracted the employee value as a string data type and assigned it to an integer data type. So make sure when you have a function and you're actually sending values back, that you are actually catching those values with a correct data type. Otherwise, you must convert it. Okay, many candidates did not call their own created procedures or functions to assist in questions. Remember, with OOP, all your methods, that's all your functions and procedures that you have in your class must be called somewhere. So you must be able to call functions and procedures. And while you are doing the exam, remember that, or keep in mind that all those functions and procedures must be called at some time. So if you didn't call it, or you see there's still one or two functions that you did not actually call, go through your question paper again, make sure that you can actually find the place where you must call those functions. Okay, learner must use the class given and not program everything in the main unit. Remember, with OOP you will have 2 units. The second unit will have your class already ready coded for you, will not be complete, but you can't just go and start creating your new class in your main unit. There is a second unit where some of the coding is already done for you. Okay. Emphasize the difference between the get method, accessor method, function, and the set method. Okay, so the get will only get values for you, it's an accessor, and the set method is one that will change some of the attributes. Okay, change. Get is usually a function, set is usually a procedure, because get is going to find an attribute for you and send it back. It's going to send it back in the result, and that means it's a function, where the set method is going to change value, so it's not going to send something back, so it's usually a procedure. Okay, make sure the class unit name is added to the users. In your first unit you must add the coding of the second unit under the users. You must globally make an object of that class, and then you must instantiate that object. Okay, this is a correct method. Remember, the most commonly made error I think here is when you create your object wrong, like this. Okay, so you must create your object correctly. Learners must practice more how to call the different types of methods, and must learn that they are going to use the methods in the class to answer the questions. Okay, so you must make use of your methods to answer the questions, and like I said, keep in mind that all your methods that actually exist must be called at some time in your program. So if it's not called, go check, make sure where it should be called, and call those methods. Okay, put confidence into learners to attempt the OOP question, because the level of thinking in OOP question became more basic than previous years. Okay, so I think if you just do enough examples of the OOP questions, you will see that it's not really that difficult. Usually you just complete a few methods. You must write a few of your own methods, and then you must be able to call those methods in the main unit. Okay, so not a lot of thinking involved there, and learners should attempt this. I think you should get good marks with question 3. Okay, last question is question 4. It's the more difficult question. Usually the learners don't have enough time left when they reach this question. I would recommend that you allocate a certain amount of time for each or for every question, and then you just attempt all the easier stuff first of that question, and then when you're done going through all 4 your questions, then you can go back to question 1 or question 2 or question 3 or your question 4 and attempt the more difficult stuff. Usually learners start off with question 1, they waste about an hour and a half or 50% of the time. Question 1, they waste a lot of time attempting the SQL, there might just be one small mistake, and then they can take a half an hour for that one mark, and then they run out of time for question 4, and then they could have easily gotten a few marks by just loading in a text file. Then they throw away like 5 to 10 marks attempting to get the 1 mark in question 2 or question 1. So make sure that you go or allocate your time efficiently so that you can go through all your questions, do the easier stuff first, and then go back and do the more difficult stuff. Okay, in question 4, usually you have the text file. You should learn your text file out of your head. Don't waste time trying to figure out the text file. So definitely some marks that you can get in question 4. I think everybody can get those marks in question 4 because you just need to learn your text file out of your head. Okay, commonly made errors here: assign file, visitors.txt, and then the variable instead of the variable and then your text file. Okay, reset visitors instead of reset your variable. Okay, read line, they say the variable s line and then your text file variable instead of the other way around. Okay, something that I noticed is that it's always the text file variable first and then the other parameter. Over here again, first it's the text file variable, then the other parameter. Okay, there were a few candidates that closed the file inside the loop that stopped the program from working correctly. So, okay, so you learned your text file and you know that there must be a close file, but now some of the candidates are putting that text file inside the while statement. So we are still running through the program, and now suddenly the file is being closed. So make sure that you put your close file outside your while statement and not inside your while statement. Okay, while not in the file, do must be a begin or else only the first line will be executed. Okay, so when you say while not in the file of your text file, make sure you have your begin and your end, because you're probably going to do some string handling and stuff inside that while statement. It's going to be more than one line, so you must use the begin and end over there. Another tip here: do not test for a text file if the question does not ask for it, because it's a waste of time. Okay, so you're not gonna get marks for testing for your text file if they did not ask for it, but I would recommend in your PAT always test for your text file to make sure it exists. But in your exam, don't waste time. You can leave it out if they don't ask for that. Okay, teacher must teach learners to code the basic text file steps when there is a question about it. The basic steps are as follow. Over here it's separated in 9 steps. Step 1, declare your variables, your text file and your s-line string. If file exists, name.txt is not true, then that's your step 2. Then you display your message and you exit. Exit will stop the procedure from running further. Okay, then step 3, the assign file. Remember I said first the text file variable, then the other parameter. This is to connect the text variable to your text file. Step 4, put the cursor at the beginning, reset. Then while not end of file, do is the loop. Remember I said you must use a begin and the end. Okay, step 6 is to read the line for the text variable. Again, first is your variable for your text file, then the variable for your text that's going to be loaded in. Okay, then your processes is your copy and your pause and stuff that you will do. Then maybe a output displayed in a rich edit somewhere, and then your close file. And the close file must be outside your while statement. It cannot be between the begin and the end. And another thing is, you must say what file do you want to close. You can't just say close file. You must say close file in brackets the variable or the file that you want to close. Okay, that's basically it for question 4. Question 4 is like a problem solving, the higher level question in your question paper, but there's still some easy stuff inside that question 4. Not all of the stuff inside your question 4 is difficult, and usually they ask you the text file in question 4 as well, so make sure that you at least get the text file correct. Okay, make sure you study the text file out of your head and that you don't make any small mistakes in question 4. There's obviously a lot more stuff that we can go through, but I still think it's always good to get some report back from previous markers to check what is the commonly made errors from previous learners, so that you do not make the same mistakes as they did. Guys, don't repeat the mistakes that the previous learners made. Okay, so if they made those mistakes, try to learn out of their mistakes. Do not make the same ones, and maximize the marks that you can get in the exam.